Russell Keith-Magee.
Well, thank you very much, Jacopo. As you said, my name is Russell Keith-Magee. Most of you have probably heard my name before, if only because I was on stage about 2 hours ago. I am an 11-year veteran of the Django core team. I was president of the Django Software Foundation from 2011 to 2015. Two other interesting tidbits. I am the reigning Australian speed talking champion, a fact which Cheryl and her colleagues will well aware of, so strap in, ladies. And along with Andrew Godwin, who is also a champion speed talker, I hold the title of most DjangoCons attended. This DjangoCon Europe collectively is our 20th. And if you have met me at one of those DjangoCons previously in the last 6 years, or seen me speak, I may have introduced myself as the CTO and co-founder of TradesCloud. TradesCloud was a software as a service company for tradespeople, plumbers, electricians, people like that. TradesCloud was my startup, and I say was because in January of this year, my business partner and I closed the doors on TradesCloud and shut down the service. As an industry, we're very fond of promoting the glossy side of startups, that a plucky bunch of engineers can take nothing more than an idea and a personal credit card, build a business empire and drive off into the sunset in a gold-plated Lamborghini. And yes, those unicorns and gold-plated Lamborghinis actually do exist. There's even a couple of them in the Django community, the unicorns, not the Lamborghinis. But it's important to remember that those stories are unicorns. They're not the normal startup experience for most people. In the VC-backed startup world, the general expectation is that if a VC firm invests in 20 companies, only one of them will actually succeed spectacularly. 4 will have some sort of exit that at least results in some sort of financial break-even, but 15 will fail outright with either a significant or complete financial loss of the investment. Interestingly, this isn't something that's unique to tech. Tech does it at a much grander scale, especially when VCs are involved, but open any small business advice book, the sort that's targeted to the plumbers and electricians of the world, and they'll warn you that 50% of businesses fail in their first year. And yet, despite the fact that failure happens all the time, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about why things fail. And as a result, many of the same mistakes, the same lessons have to be learned over and over again. Those that experience failure often feel like they're doing it alone because of the significant social stigma that's associated with failure. So this is my small attempt to restore the balance somewhat. In this talk, I'm going to talk about TradesCloud, my failed business. TradesCloud was a slow train wreck. We survived for almost 6 years, or 6 years almost to the day, and we had plenty of optimism that the success was just around the corner, but it never quite happened. But what was TradesCloud? What prompted me to dedicate 6 years of my life to it? Well, it started as a problem that I thought I could solve. If you found yourself needing a plumber, how do you pick one? Well, 15 years ago, when I first had the idea of what became TradesCloud, the best option was opening up the phone book and looking for the brightest, shiniest ad, maybe arranging a bunch of quotes, pick one basically at random. If you were really lucky, you might have been able to use Google, but that really was still looking for the shiniest ad. If the plumber turned out to be any good, well, that's great, but you don't really need another plumber for a while, so that knowledge becomes useless. And if they do turn out to be genuinely awful, well, you can't warn anyone off either. There has to be a better way, I thought. And of course, I did nothing about it. I say nothing. I did start tinkering around with this web framework. You might have heard of it, Django. I originally got involved in the Django project because I wanted to add aggregation functions to the ORM so that I could compute average ratings for average performance of a tradesperson. And in 2008, I mentored a student, Nicholas Lara, to add aggregation as a summer of code project. So, success. In late 2010, I met up with a former boss for a drink, and he tells me about his brother. His brother owns a small pest control company, and he has the same problem, but from a slightly different angle. Whereas I was looking for tradespeople in my area that could be recommended, he was a smaller company that wanted to compete with the bigger players in the market who had the shinier ads based more upon his quality of service rather than the value of his ad. And so TradesCloud was born. We had an idea. At the time, it wasn't even called TradesCloud, it was called Clever Pages. Because it was going to be a clever yellow pages. In my spare time, I started hacking together a proof of concept. That was the first mistake. And the first mistake that most tech-oriented people make. As much as Django sells itself as a rapid development framework, any non-trivial project is still going to take time and effort. And I spent a couple of months of spare time hacking together that proof of concept. German military strategist Helmut von Moltke once noted, "No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy." Or in non-military terms, Scottish poet Robbie Burns, "The best laid plans o' mice and men are gang after gley." And so it is with business ideas. At the time that I spent working on that prototype would have been eliminated if I'd actually gone to the trouble of speaking to a plumber first. Just because we had an idea and could implement the idea in software, that didn't mean we had a good business idea. It meant we had a good idea for a hobby project. And the difference is critical. A business is an idea that generates revenue. A hobby project may be fun to work on. It may even be useful for other people. But if you can't sell something, if you can't pay the bills with it, it isn't a business. And conflating the two ideas is a major problem. What we should have done is validate the idea first and then build it. But we didn't do that. And when we finally had something to show off, my business partner opened up the local newspaper, picked a bunch of local plumbers, and called them with an attempt to sell the idea. He called 10 plumbers. 5 of them suggested that he place the idea in a very anatomically implausible location. 4 of them had their secretary provide the same advice. One plumber, though, did sound interested, and he said he wanted to have a chat. That was mistake number 2, or at least it should have been a significant warning flag. At the end of the day, business is about selling something, selling a physical product, a subscription, selling services. Whatever you're doing, you're selling something. And in order to sell something, you have to have customers. If all your prospective customers hang up when you call, you have a problem. You don't have a sales channel. It doesn't matter whether you've got a machine that turns lead into gold. If you can't get that idea in front of the people who are going to shell out the money to buy your product, you might as well shut up shop now. The fact that it was very difficult to get plumbers to answer the phone should have been a warning sign that our prospective audience wasn't going to be easy to crack. But we persisted, and we had a chat with the one plumber who would actually talk to us. And we did our pitch, and he said, "Nope, not interested. But if you can make that pile of paper disappear, I'll give you as much money as you want." This was a conversation that set the direction of our company for the 6 years to come. Was it a mistake or a success? It's a little bit hard to judge. There is an extent to which we changed direction because it was the only direction that seemed open to us, which was a bad move. But it was also a very lucrative direction, so maybe it was a bit of a wash. What we identified in that conversation was a significant business problem, a business process that was being performed manually and took 3 hours a day for someone to do. And we identified a simple and reliable way that it could be automated. We identified a couple of other business processes we could automate, ways to report on some key performance indicators, and we identified a path forward that could allow us to use mobile technology to improve communication and process management. By the time we were done, and we had worked out how to immediately free up a full-time employee with a lot of potential for more. So as long as we charged less than the cost of that employee, about $50,000 Australian a year, the business owner would be ahead. Our costs were next to nothing. Our newfound customer told us that there were business processes were due to one specific contract they had, and there were many other companies on the same contract, so it should have been easy to take the same software to everyone else on the same contract and we'll profit, right? Okay, so let's keep it simple. Offer them a 50% saving of their labour costs, do some fancy footwork to reverse engineer a good reason why that was the price we were going to charge them, and just start making $25,000 a year per customer, right? Well, no. That's mistake number 3. Mistake number 3 is that we didn't take into account the human factor. In theory, charging anything less than $50,000 a year, rationally, should have been a no-brainer, easy sale. But we were selling to humans, and humans don't ever behave rationally. There's an almost bottomless body of research about how bad humans are at evaluating economic decisions and consequences. And so, when we walked in the door of a prospective customer, we did our pitch, they were almost universally blown away by what we showed them. And then we told them the price, and they started describing anatomically implausible locations again. Why? Well, first off, a sale of that size isn't easy. Asking a plumber to spend $100 a month, they know they can afford that. That's probably less than what they spend on coffee in a month. But if you ask them to spend $2,000 a month, well, that's a lot harder for them to justify. That actually starts to make a dent in their bottom line. So they're going to take some convincing. They're going to want some proof that this actually works, that it's actually going to deliver the benefit that you're promising. Secondly, we were selling software. We were completely honourable and completely truthful, and we were able to deliver everything we promised, and our software made birds sing and suddenly appear every time we were near. But we weren't the first IT salesperson that had darkened their doors, and we collectively We're part of an industry that for 40 years has systematically overpromised and underdelivered what software can do to a business. And so that's a barrier that has to be overcome. Thirdly, we were selling software. Who here is currently holding a phone worth a couple of hundred, maybe even $1,000? Right? Most of the people in this room. All right, how many of you gave more consideration to whether you should buy that 99-cent app from the App Store than you did to the decision to buy the $1,000 phone? Mostly 100%, right. That's the problem selling software. Multiply it 1,000 times when you start dealing with non-tech businesses. We've been conditioned to expect that physical, tangible things are expensive, but software will actually be cheap, better still, free. As a side note, it's one of the major problems we face with funding open source projects as well, but that's a subject for a different rant, and a rant that I've done before, previously, on this stage. Lastly, we were dealing with personal relationships. If we walked into a small plumbing business to speak with the manager, there was an odds-on chance that the bookkeeper or another significant employee in the business was the wife of the manager. And if you start talking about the benefits of being able to cut an employee, well, you can guess how well that conversation goes. And it wasn't even necessarily a family member. People don't generally want to fire people. Mistake number 4 happened as a result of an unfortunate coincidence. After closing our first sale, we got that customer to give us an introduction to some of the other possible customers. And he gave us the best possible candidates first. So our first 2 sales were both $2,000 a month sales. Our third was a smaller business, that was only $500 a month, but that gave us the confidence that we had something we could sell to both medium and small businesses. We'd closed 3 sales in rapid succession. We had $4,500 a month in revenue. Sales were really easy to close. We thought we'd found a money printing machine. And then we hit a wall. The next few sales we made just went nowhere. Never a hard no, but lots of ums and ahs, I don't know, we'll have to think about it, and yeah, that sort of stuff. We confused initial success with a pattern that was going to continue. After 3 sales in 1 month, we essentially didn't close another sale for 8 months. And that's not a good sign. Arguably, we got bitten by circumstances there. When you have lots of early success, it's very easy to think that that success will be ongoing. And that's a time when you need to be objective. If you can't consistently close sales, if you can't reliably predict your close rate, you have a problem. Mistake number 5, though, was completely our fault. We completely failed to do basic math. Our value proposition, the business process that we had optimized, existed because of the processes required by one particular contract. Our pricing scheme was simple. We charged $1 per job completed. Our initial customer, they did about 2,000 jobs a month, so we charged them $2,000 a month, which was great because it also happened to hit our 50% savings target that was originally identified. What we didn't do was add up how many jobs there actually were in the system. It turns out that if we had actually managed to close every single company on that contract, we would have only generated $12,000 a month in revenue, which sounds like a lot, and it is, and especially when your costs are so low, but our costs weren't low. We had 2 founders that were full-time and needed to be paid. Our burn rate was closer to $22,000 a month. And this led to mistake number 6. We didn't have a serious pricing discussion until it was way too late. Misled by our initial success, our pricing was basically determined by taking our burn rate and working backwards, not forwards from what the market would actually bear. My co-founder and I would have regular discussions about pricing, but all of those discussions happened against the background of, well, how are we going to make payroll this month? Which is the wrong time to be having that discussion because the 2 important options, drastically reducing the price and shutting down the company, are effectively off the table. So, we had a product that was too expensive to sell, a market that wasn't big enough to sell it to. Now, okay, the good news is that the paperwork reduction niche that we'd found wasn't unique to that one contract. There were many other similar contracts with similar paperwork requirements. We'd found the 1,000-pound gorilla in that particular market, though. Other contracts were smaller, the paperwork process requirements were subtly different on every single one of them. And that wouldn't have been a problem if we hadn't made mistake number 7. We never established a sales channel. We got our first sale almost by accident. We bumped into a customer who gave us an opportunity. Subsequent sales came by word of mouth. Word of mouth is an incredible sales channel if you can get it. But as a result, we never cracked the most important problem. How do you sell to someone who hasn't heard of you? How do you get in the door? How do you establish trust? And as a result, our sales were essentially constrained by the personal networks of our existing customers. Perth is a small, geographically isolated city. When we'd exhausted personal networks, we hadn't learnt the most important thing, how to sell our product to someone who couldn't give us a personal introduction. Joel Spolsky once noted there's no software product priced between $1,000 and $100,000. This is because a product that costs less than $1,000 can be bought on a credit card, but if software costs more than can be hidden on your expense statement, you need to have salespeople, and that means you've got to pay salespeople, and you've got to pay their commissions, and you've got to pay for the steak dinners and the drinks used to close the sale. We had a product that was squarely in this dead zone. Too expensive to be a casual purchase, but not expensive enough to support the sales process it needed. TradesCloud had a serious problem here. Once we closed a sale, we had almost zero churn rate. The only customers we ever lost were because they closed down business or they dropped the contract where we offered an advantage. What we didn't have, what we never established, was a good way to prove to new customers that we were indeed that good. There wasn't a good way to trial TradesCloud. We were managing business processes that were at the core of a trades business. Those processes have to work. And they can't be duplicated or doubled up because they are most of what the business does. There was no way to just sort of stick your toe in the water and try it out a little bit. You had to jump in or stay out. And since we had a huge price tag, most people were conservative and said no. If they got a recommendation from someone they knew, it got a little bit easier. But if that didn't exist, well, we had a problem. In order to close a sale of any size, people have to believe, really believe, what it is you're telling them. It has to be obvious and undeniable that you will give them the benefit you're promising. Or the cost of trying has to be vastly less than the cost of the software itself. In our case, even if we dropped our price to zero, the software didn't have zero cost because the cost of institutional process change associated with adopting a new piece of software at the core of a business operation was huge. Our best salesperson was a complete accident. He wasn't one of our employees. He was an employee who changed employers every 6 months. He was in upper management, had a reputation for getting things done, turning companies around, and so he kept getting poached by other companies. And he'd see the benefits of TradesCloud with one contract, so he would go in the door of every new company and say, hey, why don't you try TradesCloud? And because he was known around the industry, his word to other people was extremely valuable. When he said, this is good stuff, people believed him. His word was trusted. But even when we did make a sale, the mistakes didn't stop. Mistake number 8, we didn't pay enough attention to onboarding new customers. A sale for a product isn't closed when a contract is signed. It's closed when the person who uses the software has accepted it into their daily lives, because that's what prevents churn. If you're selling a small personal tool, the person who buys and the person who uses the tool is probably the same person. The sale is really closed when that person is using the tool every single day, because that means they're going to keep renewing the subscription. But in our case, the purchase decision was rarely made by the person who actually had to use the software. And you have to get those people on board. If anything, they're more important because they're the ones who are going to make the boss's life hell if the software that they buy isn't doing the job, or worse, is doing the job a little bit too well. Over and over again, we saw internal sabotage at companies we'd sold to. People would simply refuse to change processes and would find any excuse. Oh, the software didn't work. We had to go back to doing it manually. And after a month or two, the boss would call us and say, well, what happened to all the benefits you promised? And we had to tell them, well, you only get benefits if you use the software. What we learnt the hard way is that you sell to the business owner, but you also have to sell to the users. If you're dealing with software that is a part of a key business process, change management is key. You have to show the users how your tool does what they currently do by hand. And you have to show them that their jobs aren't at risk. The first that first employee whose 3-hour-a-day job was replaced, she wasn't fired. She was redeployed inside the same business. She went from doing a mindless office task for almost half her day and could be deployed expanding other parts of the business. About 2 years after we first deployed TradesCloud, she was running accounts and payroll. I had a significant pay rise as far as I'm aware. But despite all these mistakes, we were able to stumble along, and we were completely self-funded for almost 2 years. Now, that meant burning through a lot of personal funds, and my co-founder doing a bunch of consulting on the side, but that's just part of the startup experience, right? Well, maybe it is, but in retrospect, mistake number 9 was an entirely personal one. I shouldn't have lost as much money on the experience as I did. I knew what I considered success criteria of the experiment, but I never considered what my failure criteria were. After 2 years, I'd reached a point where my personal financial runway was running out. TradesCloud either needed to start paying a full-time wage or I wasn't going to be able to continue. And this pivoted the business. Fundraising is a full-time job. Everything else goes on hold. Sales, support, product development, everything. We tried to get VC investment, but the VC scene in Australia is pretty bad, and even worse in Perth specifically. Eventually, we managed to secure a $250,000 cash investment from a colleague of my business partner, and we got some matching funding through an Australian government program. And that gave us another 2 minutes of runway. 2 minutes. 2 years of runway. That burn rate, yo. The way we were able to secure that runway was by changing our tactics. Instead of going after individual plumbers, we started going after the head contractors, the multi-million-dollar facility management companies that were passing down these contracts. And we were able to sell them a really great story. These companies are all really competitive, and they're looking for any advantage they can get. But they're also technologically laggards because they're big established companies. They have inertia when it comes to adopting new technology. So we were able to walk in, this sprightly little company, and promise a mobile-enabled workforce and real-time tracking and forced health and safety practices and all the sorts of things that got them really excited because they could use those features as differentiators when they were bidding against government contracts. And here's mistake number 10. We forgot who we were and who we were selling to. We were selling to multi-million-dollar companies. The reason these companies are technologically laggards? They're conservative. They don't take risks. There's no incentive for individual employees to take risks. And as a result, they make very safe decisions. When they adopt new technology, they don't just pick something. They put it out to tender, and they get multiple bids, and they invite bidders to come into the head office and interrogate them. And eventually, after 6 months, they pick someone, the safe option. We got into the tendering process with almost every major facility management company in Australia. The tendering process almost always started because we managed to get into someone's ear and pitch them the idea of providing TradesCloud to all their subcontractors. What they heard was provide software to all their subcontractors. And so, at the end of the tendering process, we were told every single time, without fault, we prefer your technological solution, but we're going with your competitor because you're too risky. A two-person company was too much of a risk for a multi-million-dollar company to trust. So after 2 years of trying this tactic and being turned down by every facility management company in Australia, the money was running out again, and we built up a bit of a cash buffer. In between failing to sell to multinational companies, we'd found a little bit of a success selling to smaller facility management companies and large construction companies. The good news is that these companies were big enough that when they bought software, they wanted it customized. So as well as the $2,000 a month, they'd pay another $40,000 up front to make sure the software did exactly what they wanted it to do. And on the back of that change, we were able to get a loan from our investor again. Between making some more personal sacrifices and that cash injection, we were able to stumble along for about another 18 months. This was mistake number 11. We didn't take the hint. Every single point that we took an investment was potentially a point that it would have been a natural point to shut down the business. And in retrospect, we should have. The writing was on the wall. The simple truth is, if you can't close sales, you don't have a business. And yes, you can stumble along hoping that you're going to find the missing sales ingredient, but that takes resources, it takes money, and it takes emotional capital as well. One of the reasons the failure of TradesCloud was so personally galling is that it didn't really fail for any reason that I would have considered my fault. From a purely technical perspective, we were significantly more reliable than the multi-million-dollar multinational companies that we were integrating with. We delivered new features in timeframes that our customers considered inconceivable. When I went in and did demonstrations to multi-million-dollar head contractors, they expressed doubt that we could do what we were saying and say what we were doing, right up until the point that I showed them the code doing it live. But none of that mattered. TradesCloud failed, and ultimately because we couldn't sell what we had, or at least we couldn't sell it in quantities that allowed us to cover costs. And when you're in there giving your all and doing things that are being called magic by prospective customers, and you're still failing, that's hard to internalize. And when you layer on top of the fact that I'm a husband and a father and the sole income from that introduces all sorts of guilt and fear into the mix. And you take all that stress and add in the long hours and the weekend work and the desperate hope that this will be the thing that saves the company, you start to understand why, about 2 years ago, I had a major depressive episode. Mistake number 12, I lost sight of the fact that quitting is always an option, and that quitting doesn't mean failure. If, after 2 years, I had taken an honest audit of myself and said, you know what, this isn't working, I'm out, I would have had 4 years of my life back. That's 4 years I could have sunk into a different project. But I didn't pay attention to any of my signs. I conflated the success of the company with my own personal success. I lost sight of the fact that this was a job. And it meant to provide some income, maybe a little bit of intellectual engagement as a bonus. And if it wasn't doing that, walking away was always an option. But I didn't really consider it seriously. Why not? Well, that was kind of mistake 13 and another personal failure. I didn't stand up to my co-founder as much as I should have. And in result, we wasted a lot of time and effort, and in some cases, money. Now, I have to be clear, if only because there's a chance he might see this video. I'm not blaming Mark here. Mark's a great guy, he's extremely talented, and he's got absolutely no shame at fronting up to companies thousands of times bigger than his and telling them exactly how they should be doing things. He opened a lot of doors that I wouldn't have even considered knocking on. He was a real asset to TradesCloud as a business. The failure here was a personal one, and it's entirely my own. We didn't go into TradesCloud as complete equals. Sure, we were 50-50 business partners on paper, but when I met Mark, he was my first boss out of university. I worked for him for 4 years as a very junior subordinate. And a lot of that power dynamic really remained. I let him do a lot of things because, well, he must know what he's doing. I caved on some decisions because I could see his side and he was more experienced. And Mark is, well, you know, he's a good sales guy. He made me believe in TradesCloud. He can make you believe in things. And that got me through all sorts of lows, but it also meant that I believed even more than I probably should have. I should have been putting my own foot down and saying no more a lot more often than I did, both for the benefit of the business and for my own mental health. And so, when the money ran out for the third time, neither Mark nor myself had the energy to continue. We had a couple of last-minute Hail Mary options that we thought might have saved us. One by one, they all fell through. In the end, we were actually able to pay back the loan to our investor, not his original equity investment, though that was effectively lost. And in January of this year, we closed the door for the last time. And that's the TradesCloud story. Now, I will warn you, the plural of anecdote is not data. This is my story. There are many stories like it, but this one is mine. I don't profess to having any particular business insight. I just know that TradesCloud didn't work. And these are the 13 reasons that I can identify why. In the aftermath, I've had a lot of people, many of them in this room, reach out, give me a virtual hug or a spoon, and many have asked me if I was sad to see TradesCloud go. Frankly, the emotion that I had was relief. On January 31st, 2017, I slept like I hadn't slept for 6 years because I knew I wasn't going to be woken by a server alarm. I knew I could sleep in. I wasn't going to get a call from a support guy who couldn't find the on switch at 6 a.m. The fact that I wasn't even slightly disappointed by the loss of TradesCloud from my life after 6 years, that's the biggest sign for me that I waited far too long to step away. The good news, though, is that the process of running TradesCloud hasn't burnt me out completely. It was an amazing learning experience. In particular, it drew my attention to the problems of the world of mobile development, which has very much influenced the path that my new toy, Beware, has taken. I'm already scheming about my next venture, trying to work out how to turn Beware into something. But this time, I'm a little bit older, a little bit greyer, hopefully a little bit wiser, and I should have a better idea for what I'm looking out for. Now, if you want to talk about that, well, come and see me. I'll be around to the end of the sprints working on Beware, thanks to Revolution Systems. I've got a stash of challenge coins, so if you're owed one or you'd like to earn one for contributing to Beware, come and grab me, come and have a chat. I've got stickers as well, and I don't know if we have time for questions, but if we do, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, we have time for one or two questions.
Stampede!
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Be quick, and we will allow all three of you to make a question.
So you had a mistake number 11. Take the hint.
Yes.
Which, now this is very interesting. It's easy to judge things after the fact. And if you read other stories about people who became successful, for example, they say be persistent, be persistent. Where do you draw the line?
So you've got to be persistent and you've got to take the hint, you see.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could have succeeded, and maybe you had opposite hints as well.
And that's possibly true. And to a certain extent, it's is there something that you can see on the horizon that is drastically different? I suppose in my particular case, what I would say is that we never really did a full pivot or anything like that. It was the same business being sold to different people. We were just trying to shake down a different set of wallets. And we never really solved the fundamental problem of how do we get people to swallow a $2,000 a month pill. And that's the hint we should have been taking. That said, yes, you do need to be persistent. I suppose the question then is to balance out in your own head whether it is better to spend 6 years trying to work out if you can be persistent and make this thing work, or should you pivot and do something completely separate, completely different by starting from scratch again. You've got to be wary of the sunk cost fallacy. The money has been spent. We've been there this 4 years. The piece of the argument that can't come into play is, well, we've spent all this money. We don't want to waste that money. the decision has to be made independently at every point. Is the next step forward one that actually has a reasonable chance of success, independent of anything else, independent of how much money we spend?
So in your project, when do you think you should close it? I mean,
When?
At what point, ideally, and how it would be? You think you should sell it or just step away?
Oh, we tried to sell it as well. So it very much, specifically in the case of TradesCloud, I think we probably should have taken the hint after about 6 months when we started discovering we couldn't sell it at all to anyone. Because that was an indicator that there was a serious problem here, and it wasn't something that just sticking a brighter, glossier brochure was going to make people close the sale. Yeah, unless we could actually get something like VC money. So, but more generally, it really does depend upon the business. So, I think the key one out of that is our initial business case validation was never very strong. We found one person who proved to us that we could charge $2,000 a month. We never proved that there was a business worth of people who would be paid $2,000 a month. Okay.
Sorry, yours is the last question.
I guess you don't have an MBA, right?
I do not have an MBA, no.
Lucky.
PhD, not MBA.
But did you have any experts giving you advice, business experts? Did you talk to business people?
We talked to many business people. We talked to, we had many experts, read many books, and they basically all come down to the same thing, is that you need to validate you've actually got a business before you start trying to sell it. And by the time we had gotten far down the line, well, it was already too late. We were kind of already down that path. Yes, if we'd done that full analysis, we would have come to that conclusion, I suspect.
Thank you, Russell.
Right.
A big round of applause.
There you go.